Hello, I'm Sophia.
Hi, I'm Phoebe, and we're from Bamnbeyond. This is a British Asian opinion show, BAO, otherwise known as the BAO Show.
Today we are discussing how British Asians feel about anti-Blackness within the Asian community. In July, we interviewed some British Asians to get their opinions on this topic.
Anti-Blackness, where do we start? Despite doing all of the research regarding anti-Blackness, we can only provide you with factual information on how the Black community has been affected. However, as we are not Black ourselves, we are unable to provide you with a completely accurate perception. We still wanted to discuss this topic as we feel like it is important to address things that may make you feel uncomfortable. And we wanted to keep it as authentic as possible by exploring the anti-Blackness within the Asian community and to give our perspective.
But before we begin, first of all, do you think racial minorities can be racist to one another? Whilst we may be classified as a group of minorities, there's a concept of privilege amongst the marginalized as a result of colorism. Colorism, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. The topic of colorism will be discussed in the following episode, so stay tuned to hear more. But back to topic, with consideration to Asians, we also need to acknowledge the privileges we have access to within ethnic minorities. This can be understood by the concept of the model minority myth, which depicts Asians, or specifically Asian Americans, as smart, wealthy, hardworking, independent, and passive, or at least what is expected of them. This stereotype, whilst harmful, also depicts Asians as superior to other ethnic minorities. Chanel Wong, the director of Asian American Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park, states in an email to NPR that the concept of the model minority myth makes a flawed comparison between Asian Americans and other groups, particularly Black Americans, to argue that racism includes more than 2 centuries of Black enslavement, which can be overcome by hard work and strong family values. As a result, the model minority myth has been used as a racial wedge, but not only that, we also have to consider how not all Asians have the same level of privilege. For example, East Asians versus other Asian ethnic minorities.
We can see the link between colorism, anti-Blackness, as well as the complex topic of the model minority myth and eugenics. Scientific racism has supported the baseless stereotype that Black people are lazy. This stereotype, paired with the model minority myth, presents us with a situation where Asian people are being uplifted in society and praised for their merits, whilst Black people are being repressed. This causes a lot of disparity between the two minority groups. But let us talk about anti-Blackness. Anti-Black racism is prejudice, attitudes, beliefs, stereotyping, or discrimination that is directed at Black people. Anti-Blackness can be systemic, or on an individual level, and it exists in the form of exclusion, microaggressions, colorism, as well as cultural appropriation, and there are many, many more forms of racism. We need to understand that all of these concepts link through intersectionality. Intersectionality is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as the interconnected nature of social categorizations, such as race, class, and gender, as they apply to a given individual or a group. This is regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage.
The topic of anti-Blackness has been an ongoing issue within the UK as well as across the world. In the UK alone, according to the UK's government's race disparity audit referenced in The Guardian, relative to whites and Asians, Black defendants at Crown Court were the most likely to be remanded in custody. Between 2017 and 2018, Black people in Britain were approximately 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police than white people were, and 3 times more likely than Asians. Black Caribbean students were permanently excluded at nearly 3 times the rate of white British students, while Black people were more likely to be unemployed and homeless than all other racial minority groups.
Anti-Blackness is prevalent amongst members of the Asian community, particularly the older generation. It may be presented in overt or covert ways. Following the BLM protests, which occurred in late May, the topic of anti-Blackness within Asian communities has become an important issue. While some Asians have stood up for BLM, some others have either remained idle or passive, and a select few have even expressed their lack of support for BLM. As a result, this has led to a divide in the Asian community, and we feel like this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Let us hear more from our participants on their views.
Well, firstly, it exists.
I think anti-Blackness is a really, really big issue in the Asian community. I have to be honest, it's not something that I kind of thought about before. It was something that I start to think more in recent years. And I guess like partly it might be because I was never affected by these issues, in the sense that's why I didn't really think about it.
I actually hadn't heard of the term anti-Blackness before this year. So I think it's important for us to like also include, like, when we're talking about it, what does it actually mean and why is it a problem? Because I don't know if the term has been around for that long, but for me it was new this year. And I think that's important to consider as well, like when we're speaking to other people in Asian communities, because it's really easy to alienate people or push them out of a conversation by using terms that they don't know, they don't understand, particularly if English isn't their first language.
I used to be quite like oblivious to the anti-Blackness in the Asian communities, but with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I have realised like how different some Asians' opinions are. On like Subtle Asian Traits a while ago, people were talking about BLM, and there were a lot of people in those comments sort of saying really derogatory things as well, like people sort of our age, which I thought was, and like probably educated like we were, and I thought it was really odd because as like we're all sort of minorities and like people of colour, should we not all be like, they're not just fighting for Black rights when they're talking about Black Lives Matter. It's sort of like a fight for everyone.
When I was younger, I used to live in quite big cities. However, I went to very multicultural schools. However, I never really thought about skin color. When you're younger, you're quite oblivious to the fact. However, as you grow up, especially in the Asian community, you don't talk about skin tone that much. However, I did get a very strong presence of the darker your skin tone is. So even with the Black community, the more you should stay away, or the more you should try to avoid it, even if it is just your own skin tone.
Growing up, I think many of our parents that have migrated to like Western countries have kind of fallen into the model minority myth.
A lot of like Asians who believe in that sort of like have this vendetta against like Black people as well. They just sort of see them as like they wouldn't have those issues if they were like as Asian model minorities, but like that's not really true.
And like growing up, they would always make comments like, oh, you don't want to date a Black person, or Black people steal, like all of these stereotypes. And they always tell us to like keep our head down, avoid stuff, and just work hard and you'll get somewhere.
So I feel like people are just quite ignorant, but is not really spoken about at all. Is the most that I spoke about it or known about it when I was younger was that darker is the worst. More darker the worse it is.
I think overall it's so deep entrenched. It's not even like an issue of being like anti-Black. I'd say it's anti-dark in general. There are like a lot of Asian communities that are very like, in Southeast Asia, even in certain parts of like China, Hong Kong, like certain areas, like people are very, very beautifully tanned and have different skin tones. But there is also like in the beauty industry, there is a standard, like a white beauty standard, that is a bit, I think that does a lot to the rhetoric. It's kind of enforcing this thing since you're young, from a young age, from baby. It enforces it into your family's upbringing, into what your aunties say, what your uncles say. It's in the media all the time about, skin whitening. It's about like, the way a model or a celebrity looks.
My parents personally, like, they knew it would be hard for me as an Asian person. And in their eyes, they wanted me to not associate myself with Black people so that I could have more an advantage in the world by being surrounded by white people.
it's my personal opinion that I don't think Asians, or specifically, I don't think my mother is particularly racist to black people because of the color of their skin, but more because of what they've been fed to think black people are, if that makes sense, you know? I feel like the media is very complicit in showing this idea of what Asians are, what white people are, what black people are, what Indians are, what South Asians are. Like, I feel like there are all stereotypes of all types of races.
It's like with the news, like if you think about it, like if you're black, they label you as a thug. If you're brown, they'll label you as a terrorist. If you're white, they'll just say you have a mental health problem if you do something really stupid. And it's just like, why can't everybody have the same problem in a sense? Like, why can't these other people that are so-called bad people, why can't they be suffering from mental health problem as well? Like, why are the others labeled as something else when you won't label the other person that?
I think it's really hard to tackle it on a large scale, but I think you can educate your parents, you can educate your family if they sort of make comments about it.
The thing with anti-blackness is that we are quiet about it in our own communities. Sometimes we even think it's like, oh, it just exists, there's nothing we can do about it, it's just how they are, you know, especially when talking about the older generation, that's just how they are. But people can change. So I really think it's worth the effort to have these conversations and to try to change them. Yes, they're going to be infuriating conversations if there's people in your community or even in your family who don't understand or don't agree with your opinions. But it's definitely worth having these conversations.
If you are going to call your parents and your loved ones out for it, like, don't think of it as a debate, because I feel like if you go into it with that mindset, it's already incredibly combative and aggressive, and that's not conducive to a good conversation with them. I know from experience. I feel like what you should have is just hear them out and then present the reasons why they're wrong. Like, at the end of the day, it's a conversation, so it is a bit of push and pull, and you know, just them being called out on it is much more helpful than you not doing anything at all.
There should be a thing within all communities. So, like, you know how we have community centers and people go to the community center? I think there should be classes where it's not just bam, 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 there's lots of information and people are just being like overwhelmed with what's going on, but it should be there to help people raise awareness and be more aware of their surroundings and things like that. I just think you need to inform yourself. The more educated you are, the more access you have to information, the more people that you have access to, the more understanding you're going to be.
I feel like the most helpful one and the most obvious one is when it happens, call it out. I feel like a lot of the times we as the children of our parents, we're very much used to them making these comments. And while that may be the case, it doesn't mean that we should stop ourselves from calling them out on this type of behavior, because it is unacceptable. Like, I wouldn't allow that sort of language or rhetoric to be said by my friend. And if they are, I would immediately call them out on it. So I don't understand why I shouldn't do the same if a member of my family does. Like, I feel like I should do it even more because it is a member of my family.
I feel like because I'm not a black person, there is no way for me to truly express like sort of the prejudices and the stereotypes that they must be subjected to. But as an Asian person, I feel like we should be standing in solidarity with people of color, with black people, and sharing their voices. So that is not just because of the BLM movement, it should have been something that we were doing anyway, but because of the BLM movement now, because it's such a huge topic, we need to sort of keep it alive. It's not on trending anymore, but it's definite, the movement is still going.
Like, call them out and explain and have that conversation as to why they're wrong. And it's very difficult, especially when talking to Asian parents. Like, I faced that problem, and it's an uphill battle. But I feel like if we shirk away from it, if we don't do that, then I think it's a disservice that we're doing to to everyone else, because what we're doing is we're letting our parents continue to have these mindsets when we could potentially change it by just engaging in a conversation with them.
And not expecting overnight change, because thinking about people that I know in my community, the opinions that they've had them for so long. It's going to take time for them to change, even if it's exhausting. But I think it is our responsibility to have these conversations and to create that change, because it's not the responsibility of Black people. And also, we're more likely to be listened to, as a member of that community, a member of whatever Asian community we're in, we're more likely to be heard.
Even if you're Asian, even if you have your own sort of issues to deal with, as a member of an Asian community, you need to remember that you need to extend that hand to the Black community, just as much as we'd hope that they would extend a hand to us when we talk about our difficulties as an Asian community.
But I feel like another major one is stop saying the N-word. I think I've come across way too many Asians for my liking who use the word and don't find any problem with it whatsoever.
Of course, there is the issue of like appropriating Black culture in the Asian community as well. That our generation, that is a whole other conversation.
Following on from the interviews, I think one of the biggest points which stuck with me was personal experience expressed by KG. She mentions how her parents personally knew it would be hard for her as an Asian person in their eyes, as they didn't want her to associate with Black people, so she could have more of an advantage in the world by surrounding herself with white people. I thought it was quite shocking to hear that her parents not only acknowledged the differences between people's race, but chose to act on it by forming a boundary between them. This is yet but one of many views which have been expressed from the older generation. Rather than acknowledging them as a person, they are basing their judgment on their appearance. As KG states, her parents fall under the idea of the model minority myth.
I feel like every individual in the Asian community has had different experiences in their life, which has formulated their views towards Black people. For example, Ari and Kieran said that they live in multicultural areas, and so they went to schools with people from different backgrounds. Therefore, they're more understanding of people from different ethnicities. Some of our participants, like Benzar and Kieran, have identified how the media is instrumental to affecting people's opinions. For example, Hollywood movies' portrayal of different ethnicities reinforce stereotypes and archetypes. Also, the news is complicit in how they describe people. For example, Black youths are often associated with gang violence and crime. KG has mentioned that cultural appropriation is a large issue amongst our generation, and Benzar said that there are Asians who use the N-word and that it's extremely problematic and should be discouraged.
I agree that the media's influence has greatly affected the mindset of many people's views. However, the use of social media within terms such as BLM has also assisted in helping others educate themselves on issues affecting the Black community. For example, Julie said she came to understand anti-Blackness following the BLM movement, with Steph stating how she has been constantly reading online articles and viewing documentaries to educate herself. She also mentions that due to the BLM movement, it has encouraged Asian people to speak up and have these difficult conversations with their families, which is something I can relate to myself.
A lot of our interviewees have said that anti-Blackness can be tackled by confronting family members and friends who have racist views. Julie mentioned that it is hard to tackle anti-Blackness on a large scale, but you could start small by talking about the topic with those who surround you. Katie said that it will be hard to change the mind of your parents, but you can positively impact your children by teaching them about the issues. And Benzo suggested that instead of treating it like a debate, treat it like a discussion. Katie also said that our job as Asians is to listen to Black voices and to amplify them, especially during these hard times, just like we would expect Black people to do the same for us when we face a crisis.
Natalie talks about the term anti-Blackness as being something new to her. She adds that others should not be alienated for not understanding the idea. It is easier to alienate or push people out of conversations by using terms they don't know, particularly if English isn't their first language. However, with the BLM movement, we have been fortunate enough to have a range of resources in a number of different languages for people to come to understand the issues of what's occurring on right now. Anti-Blackness is not something which can be changed within minutes of talking to someone, especially if an individual has learned and believed a certain view is correct for many years of their lives. However, this does not mean we should not be trying to engage discussions, as it can be unlearned with time and patience, which is something Steph mentions as well. We hope that with this topic of anti-Blackness, we can encourage you as viewers to engage in these difficult discussions and continue to educate yourselves on these topics.
If you have any opinions on anti-Blackness within the Asian community, perhaps you feel strongly about the matter, you can reach out to us on social media and share your opinions. Also, if you want to get involved with season 2 of the BAO Show, please feel free to contact us. Our social media is bamnbeyond, that is BAMNBEYOND. We are active on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can buy us a bubble tea via coffee in order to support us and fund our future endeavors. Please like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a comment down below.
Don't forget, on the BAMBI on Instagram, we also have a filter for the BAO Show. Please check it out and don't forget to tag us when you use it, as we'd love to hear all of your thoughts on the different topics. We know there's a lot we have yet to cover in this video, but the conversation doesn't end here. If you want to come and chat to us about this topic or anything more, you can also join us for a discussion on our Discord server. Thank you for watching and see you again soon.